Alright, hello everybody. I'm going to be showing you today how to make a script that will allow your character in-game to change point of view from first person to third person with a click of a button. And first things first is setting up Unity. I already opened up a project here and I already imported all the assets and basic packages. Over here, you'll notice the assets here. There's a character controller section here in the standard assets that actually has some predefined scripts here that you could actually use to move the character that we'll be making on later today. Okay, so first things first, we are going to be making a new folder in assets. So we're gonna go to create folder. And we'll name this my scripts. We'll be putting all our custom script in here so that we can at least keep it away from the default packages and make it easier to navigate to. Okay, so first things first. Alright, so now that we have that done, let us add some things to this world. Let us make a plane for our character to stand on. Alright, so here I made a plane, and now we're gonna change the scale here so that, there we go, some more room for our character. Okay, and it's gonna be kind of dark, so we're gonna be adding a light to this dull little area. There we go, directional light. And look, that brightens up the area. Alright, directional light. There we go. Okay, this should be fine. We'll just maybe rotate this a bit so it's not too bright. There we go. Alright, and last thing to do here is let's add in our character. And wait for it. There he is. Alright, it's not much, but this is going to be our character to test out the script that we're going to be making later on. And while we're at it, let's rename him and call him Player 1. Alright, so I'm just gonna also go ahead and, while having the player selected, I'm gonna go ahead and add a character controller to this. You really don't have to, at this moment, you really don't have to add a character controller for this character because we're not going to be making a custom script that'll be using the character controller. But you can feel free to go ahead and, if you want to, you can make a script later on that'll use the character controller so we can move the character around. But for now, this tutorial is going to focus on changing the character perspective from first person to third person. Alright, then now that we have our character here, let's go ahead and add in the first person and third person cameras that we're going to be using. So we'll go to Game Object, Camera, and here we have a camera. Now I'm gonna see if I can position this more or less inside the character. Put it up to more or less where eye level would be on a character. There we go. And while we're at it, let us go ahead and delete the main camera because that's not what we're going to be using for our character here. Let us go ahead and rename the camera for this character to first person cam. And to make sure that the camera actually follows the player if it ever moves, go ahead and click and drag and parent child the camera to player 1. Now As you notice, it'll have its own drop-down list showing that it is in fact paired. Now, we also need our third-person camera. So let's make another camera and position it. The camera preview down in the corner also helps. So we'll position it so it's more or less in where a third-person camera would be. Alright, that looks about right. There we go. And now let's rename this camera to third-person cam. And like the first-person camera, let's go ahead and attach it to the player 1 capsule that we made so that it will in fact follow wherever the player would go. Actually, I think it could be just a bit more centered. Okay. Alright then, now that we have the cameras attached, we can go ahead and start working on the script that's going to allow us to change between these two cameras. So we're going to go to here, Assets, our custom folder that we made, My Scripts, and we are going to right click in this folder and press Create JavaScript. And go ahead and name this JavaScript Change POV. And just some advice, you can also go up here to Assets and press Create JavaScript if you have a folder selected within the Assets folder, and it'll go ahead and create it that way. That's another way you could do it. Okay, so let us now open up the script, which will bring up the Unity script editor. Okay, and now what we have here in front of us is the new JavaScript that we made, the POV script. Okay, so let's start by making some space here and let us declare some variables. Now we are going to be making game object variables. This will allow us to pair up, declare game objects and allow us to link it with objects that already exist in the scene or that we could actually import from the assets folder. It's to help us later on so that we could actually pair our cameras and our player to the script so that the script knows exactly which objects it's going to be affecting in which way. So let's start by creating a variable for our player. So we're going to do var the player game object. Now you're going to want to be careful when saying game object, because there is a game object later on that uses a lowercase g, but here when we're declaring it, we're going to be using a capital G. And we're going to go ahead and end that line and do the same. We're going to make other variables for our first person camera and the third person camera. So I'm just going to go ahead and put first person cam game object, third person cam game object, and we're also going to be adding a fourth variable called check. This is going to help us later on when we're with our if-else statements that we're going to be using to actually change the cameras. Okay, now we need to make sure that both cameras, when we start our game, that both cameras aren't active at the same time, or else Unity is going to be confused with which camera to use. So we're gonna go ahead and start our game in first person mode. So we have to then deactivate the third person camera. So here in function start, so that Unity knows that whenever the game starts, it'll run whatever's in here before it gets to the update section. So we're going to go ahead and deactivate the third person camera here with third person cam right there. We're going to put dot lowercase g game object dot active false. Now this line will make sure that at the very start, before or while everything is loading in, that the third person cam is actually deactivated. And while we're at it, just to make sure, we're going to also go ahead and make sure that our first person camera dot active is always on when the game starts. And we're going to go ahead and make check equal to true. Okay, so this is how the game is going to start out. So we're going to be in first person mode when we start our game. Now we're going to go to the update, and this is where we're going to put the code to actually change the point of view in game by pressing a button. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and bind the change point of view key to R. So we're gonna be using an if statement to detect what button is being pressed. So we're gonna go ahead and say if input dot get key down, so it's saying when the button is being pressed and let go. And we're gonna put open parentheses key code. Now key code is filled with information mostly regarding the keyboard, so it'll actually has all the letters and most of the numbers that the keyboard actually has. So if you notice, we're going to press dot and all of these show up, and these are basically all the characters that are found on a keyboard, along with some other functions. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and press R and enter, so that if we press the letter R, then it will actually register as an input. So if, close the if parentheses and open brackets and close brackets, just so that we don't forget. Now we're also going to put another if statement in here, so that it actually detects whether or not we're in first person or third person when we press our key. So we're going to put if, and this is where check comes into play. So check, we're going to make it that check will always be true if we are in first person. So if check is true and we're pressing R, then that means we want to get from first person to third person. So that means we're going to have to deactivate our first person cam, game object, active, false, and move on to third person. So third person cam, game object, active, true. And we'll go ahead and put an else statement here, so that in case check is not true, then that means we're in third person and we want to go to first person. So we're gonna then put first person cam, game object, active equals true, and third person cam, game object, active equals false. And we're going to go ahead and close these brackets. And let's see. There we go. And finally, what we're going to do is we're going to update our check variable. So we're going to put check is equal to not check. So that way, from here, if it detects that check is true, then it'll get us to third person. And if this is actually, and if check is actually true and it satisfies this, it's not going to go to the else statement. So it'll just go down to finish this if statement. So that means before we fully complete this if statement, we're going to also turn it to not check. So that means true will then become false. And the next time we press, so that means that the next time we press R, check will be false, which means that we'll be going down to the else statement and then switching to the first person cam. And then it'll then change the check variable to not its version. So that means false will then become true, and vice versa for every time we press R. Now we're going to go ahead and go up to File, Save, to save our changes here. And I'm going to close out. And now we're back here to our main hub. Okay, so now we're going to go up here and we're going to go ahead and attach our script to player 1. So we're going to click player 1, click and drag the script over to add component. And now I'm going to go ahead and minimize character controller. Here's our script, and now here are the game objects that we declared as variables. And as you can see, nothing selected. So you have to come over here, click on this dot, and it'll open up this little menu. We're going to navigate to scene because that's where our player is. So we're going to go ahead and click player 1. Now we're going to go ahead and attach our first person camera and our third person camera to the script as well. Okay, there we go. Now, if all things, okay, there we go. So now we're gonna go ahead and test our script. All right, now let's go ahead and go into our game and test out the script. So now we're gonna go ahead and click on. So now we're gonna go ahead and click R on our keyboard, and there we go. So now we have a toggle point of view button. So there we go. I hope that was helpful for many of you, and goodbye.